Every few months, the internet decides that the world is ending. Again. I don't want to brag, but I've personally survived several apocalypses. If you're old enough to remember the Y2K panic, there were a lot of just normal, worldly, secular concerns, but it also swept through the church in really strange ways, predicting the rapture, the second coming, the end of the world in general. You may remember the blood moon cycles from about 15 years ago. If you grew up in the church, you probably remember the Left Behind books, the movies, and all of this came together to make it seem like every time the news station played scary music, the end of the world was imminent. For a lot of us, fear-based end times type Christianity was our first real type of catechism. But the truth is, the Bible spends a lot more time telling us how to live than how to predict the end. But before we dig further into that, if you're new here, I'm Cameron. I'm a Christian, husband, father, assistant pastor, and world-class trash collector. The Order of Eden exists to help bridge the divide between faith and action across many domains. And because of that, I want to talk to you today about the most recent rapture that we all missed. Earlier this year, there was an interview on a channel called CentTwins TV. They interviewed a man who is commonly named Brother Joshua, because no one can really pronounce his last name. He's a man from South Africa, and he predicted with absolute certainty that the rapture would occur on September 23rd or 24th. And he said,
I give you 1,000,000,000% that on the 23rd or 24th, the rapture of the church will take place.
He claimed that he got this date because he had a vision of Jesus, where Jesus told him 23rd or 24th of this past September. So, sorry you missed it. I missed it too. As the internet does, it went kind of crazy with this. There was a hashtag Rapture talk that took off, and people were all in on this prediction. And the strangest thing is, this guy, this Brother Joshua, came out of nowhere. He's from South Africa, that much is clear. He claims to have been an assistant pastor in the early 2000s and a pastor briefly around 2016, I think. But it only comes from his testimony. Everything that he says only comes from what he said in this one interview. The media hasn't even been able to track down the churches that he claimed to have worked for. No one knows if he has theological training. He's not affiliated with any church or known group that we know of. I honestly don't even know how the channel that interviewed him found him at all. That is the most baffling part to me. So, of course, September 23rd and 24th came and went with nothing happening, except for a lot of disappointment, hurt, confusion, and a lot of mockery from people outside the church and people inside the church, because it kind of deserved it. What are you going to do? So he went back on the podcast, and instead of apologizing, he recalculated. Actually, someone else who made a YouTube video trying to justify the whole thing recalculated and explained how the rapture is still going to take place on September 23rd or 24th. This was in early October that they said this, mind you. They claimed that the September 23rd and 24th date was still correct, but they said, oh, you know what? Currently, we're in the Gregorian calendar. We need to go back and schedule it by the Julian-calendar. So then it translated to roughly sometime October 8th or 9th or something around there.
1,000,000,000%.
And that date came and went.
Billion.
And Brother Joshua has been virtually silent. And this is just the latest manifestation of this type of thing, with the way algorithms work, pushing things that make people anxious, things that are sensational. And as a result, you get young Christians being discipled by 30-second clips online. Yeah, I understand the irony, but stay with me for a minute. And honestly, when you're in a culture like that, it can be tough, because I remember growing up with 9/11 and the Iraq War, and everything was related to prophecy. Even Nostradamus supposedly knew 9/11 was going to happen, if only he told us in a more clear way. People were predicting Saddam Hussein as the Antichrist. who hasn't been accused of being the Antichrist? You have maps of the Middle East with Daniel's prophecy kind of overlaid. You're hearing constant panic in political talking points. Attempting to study Revelation was actually one of the first things that I tried to do. I was probably 12 or 13, convinced that I was going to read through Revelation and just figure out all this stuff. Yeah, kids are dumb. But after growing up a little bit more, it became obvious that all of this fear-based prophecy digging wasn't going to make me more holy. It was just going to make me anxious and politically reactive. And it would be easy to look at a case like the most recent Brother Joshua thing and think, oh, goodness, it's just the internet. The internet's just messing everything up. This goes back so far. A very early schismatic group in the church that was called the Donatists, they were kind of doomsday prophets in a sense. They were always thinking that the return of Christ was very, very close, and they lived like it, and not in a good way. Leading up to 500 AD, there was a sweep of panic in the church. Leading up to 1000 AD, there was a sweep of panic. Any round, big number, really. Martin Luther, of course, famously said that the Pope was the Antichrist. In 1844, there was a group called the Millerites, and they had a date set, and it came and went with all the disappointment you would expect. It became known as the Great Disappointment. The Jehovah's Witnesses, not Christian, but they predicted the coming of Christ quite a few times. And while not quite as sensational, even in the evangelical camp, there was a very famous book called 88 Reasons Why the Rapture Will Be in 1988. That sold between 2 and 4 million copies. Maybe you remember the whole Harold Camping fiasco in 2011. And then after that, there were blood moon cycles that we were supposed to be watching out for. And yeah, it can be easy to like sit back and laugh at a lot of this, but I know of people who got so wrapped up in these things and were sure the Lord was going to return on this certain day. And it can be devastating to someone's faith, even if they're wrong. They've been deceived. They've been taken in. It can still have devastating consequences. It's tempting to laugh. It's tempting to just point to no man knows the day or the hour, but the truth is people get drawn into this stuff and it leaves them shattered in their faith. And honestly, it just gets quite exhausting. I wasn't alive, but in the 80s, when barcodes came out, they thought, oh, this is going to be the mark of the beast. And then in the 2000s, they were RFID chips. Those were the mark of the beast. In the 2010s, you had like biometrics and microchips. And the 2020s, it's something like QR codes, digital wallet, AI, all of them are the mark of the beast. And it seems like no matter what's happening in Israel, it's always a sign of the end. If there's a conflict mounting or actually happening, it's Jesus's wars and rumors of wars. If there's talks of peace, then it's the Antichrist who makes a peace deal with the people of God for 7 years. Basically, if it rains or shines in Israel, it's Revelation unfolding in front of us. And in the internet age, we're being discipled by an algorithm that prefers panic over prayer. It prefers hype over holiness and fear over faithfulness. And all this panic is really unhealthy, the way people can fall into it. COVID did a number on people, and that, I don't know if anyone tied that to the end of the world. Probably. Why not? What isn't the end of the world? But I literally saw a man driving in a car alone with a mask on like 3 days ago. It's 2025. It's almost the end of 2025. Stuff like this, all these panics, these hypes, they do a number on people. I know of people incredibly disillusioned after failed false prophecies. And even if you don't feel like you reacted as poorly to some of these things, you know people who are afraid of every election cycle, every time the government changes, every new technology, this, that. There's a lot that really get people panicked instead of praying. And of course, as a Christian, the return of Christ shouldn't be a scary thing. But then you get some people who go in the opposite direction. They hope so badly that everything's a sign of the end that it's like they have a Christianized death wish. It's just a happier looking outlook from someone who is hoping they don't wake up tomorrow. And to get a little niche here, to get a little inside baseball with it, most of this panic comes from the premillennial view of the end times. If you don't know what that is, maybe I'll do a different video about it. And it is what I am. I feel like I'm a very modest premillennialist. I don't try to make a lot of wild claims about it. I don't try to be too certain about a lot of it. But it definitely comes from our camp, this very imminent return of Christ. And then you have the other positions, the amillennialist and the postmillennialist. Now, let me tell you, I can't be the amillennialist or the postmillennialist, even though I wish I could. I wish I could be postmillennialist. If you know anything about that theology, they are so positive and hopeful and always pushing towards the future because it's a whole thing. It would take too long. Anyway, the postmill has Christian progress and flourishing as its trajectory for the world. The amillennialist is focusing heavily on Christ already reigning in heaven with the saints, and they don't seem to have the same level of panic. And even though I don't find those systems compelling biblically, there's some stuff that we should be able to take from that, because in the premillennial position, for some reason it leads to a lot of panic, but it shouldn't, because no matter where you fall, which system you like or some other system that you invented, none of the systems should require you to read the news with Revelation in one hand and a calculator in the other. Acts 1:7 still exists. It's not for you to know the times or the seasons. And Jesus redirects them to service, not timetables. But whatever camp you fall into, if your view of the end means that you don't live and serve now, that's a problem. If thinking that Jesus will return next Tuesday stops you from building the things that have lasting kingdom impact, then you've lost the thread somewhere along the way. There's an ancient Greek proverb that says, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit." And to bring it into the Christian space, there's a quote attributed to Martin Luther where he said, "Even if I knew the world were to end tomorrow, I would still plant an apple tree today." So, long story short, I don't know when Christ is coming back. You don't know when Christ is coming back.
1,000,000,000%.
But Christ didn't really tell us to decode the end. He told us to be faithful until the end. So even if you're not the type of person who gets caught up in these types of predictions, maybe just think about how you view other things in the world, whether it's the politics, the things going on even just in your own life, because the same root of fear and anxiety can be there. You may not have gotten freaked out by someone predicting the rapture, but maybe you got freaked out by global warming timetables. Maybe you get freaked out every time the news tells us there's a new nation that you need to be worried about. I'll bet they have oil. But fear will paralyze us. Fear will make us spectators. Faith will make us servants. So if you want faith that leads to action instead of paralysis, if you want faith with a backbone, if you want a faith that builds something, then stick around. That's what I'm trying to do here. See you in the next one.